He stopped, started again. It's complicated. Things usually are, Eli said. My father, Cade stopped again. His jaw was working slowly. He's not simple to leave. It's not just leaving a place. He looked at the rain. You understand complicated fathers. I had an uncomplicated father, Eli said, but I've seen them. Yeah. Cade turned his head slightly. Not quite facing Eli. Not quite not. The 8 inches between their shoulders felt different now than it had a minute ago, charged in some way that the cold air off the storm couldn't account for. When I leave, Cade said carefully, I don't know where I'd go. Eli looked at him. He said nothing for a moment. You'd know when you got there, he said finally. He said it simply, the way he said most true things. That's how it works, I think. Cade turned and looked at him fully then. Directly. And they were standing in a space that had felt like 8 inches before but was now, somehow, rather less than that. And Cade's eyes in the gray light were very dark and very open and not performing anything. The rain kept coming. Neither of them moved. Then from somewhere in the corral came an indignant, operatic sound. Moses, clearly, expressing his substantial feelings about the weather. And they both exhaled at the same time, and the moment broke gently, like something fragile being set down rather than dropped. Cade turned back to the rain, but the corners of his mouth were doing something, and the line of his shoulder was different from before, softer, like he'd put something down himself. They stood in the storm shelter for another 20 minutes while the rain ran its course. Then they went back to check on the horses. Moses had gotten partially loose and needed resecuring. This took both of them and involved a certain amount of absurdity, and somewhere in the process they were both wet and cold, and Cade laughed twice. Not the full open laugh he'd given Jesse, but something quieter and warmer, directed somewhere between Eli and nobody's business. And Eli found this entirely preferable to the other kind, for reasons he chose not to examine too closely just then. Part 4 Fracture. Chapter 15 Jesse Speaks. Jesse found Cade by the creek 2 mornings after the storm. Cade was sitting on his flat rock, the one he'd started to think of as his morning spot even though it was technically just a rock by a creek in his father's temporary camp. And he was drinking coffee and looking at the water and not thinking about anything specific, which was a lie he was telling himself with mixed success. Jesse sat down on a nearby rock without invitation, which was entirely characteristic of him. So Jesse said, "Good morning to you too," Cade said. "The farm boy," Jesse said. Cade looked at the creek. "What about him?" "I'm just observing," Jesse said, in the tone of someone who is doing considerably more than observing. "You're different when he's around." "I work with him every day. Of course I'm." "Not like that," Jesse said. He said it without particular heat, just with the directness of someone who has known you long enough to dispense with certain formalities. "I've known you for 6 years, Cade. I've seen you work with people." A pause. "You watch him when he's not watching you." The creek ran. A bird somewhere above the canyon rim made a sound and was quiet. "Jesse," Cade said. "I'm not judging," Jesse said. "I genuinely, completely am not judging. You know that about me." "Yeah," Cade said. He did know that about Jesse. It was one of the things he'd always been careful with Jesse, which was different from being safe with him. Jesse wouldn't judge, but Jesse would say things out loud. And once things were out loud, they existed differently than they had when they were still internal. "I just think," Jesse said, and his voice had gone more careful now, "that you should think clearly about this." "I am thinking clearly," Cade said. "He's your father's hostage," Jesse said, simply, not cruelly, just, here is the fact of it. "I know what he is. He's here because Rex needs leverage over his family. The day Rex decides the situation is resolved, he goes home. He goes back to his farm and his brother and his mother and that life, which is a real life which is not this." Jesse gestured at the camp. "And you're still here." Cade was quiet. I'm not saying anything bad about him, Jesse said. I'll be honest, he seems like a genuinely good person, which is rare enough that it's notable. But Cade, you understand the situation. I understand the situation, Cade said. His voice was very level. Jesse looked at him for a moment, then he stood up from his rock. All right, he said. I said my piece, that's all. He walked back toward the camp. Cade sat on his rock and looked at the creek and held his coffee cup in both hands and thought. He knew all the things Jesse had said. He had always known them. They were the same things he had told himself repeatedly, in different orderings with different emphases. They were true things. The fact that they were true things was exactly the problem. Eli was going home. Eventually. Whatever Rex decided the endgame of this arrangement looked like, Eli was not a permanent resident of this camp. He was temporary and Cade was not, and those were the parameters and they did not bend to how Cade felt about them. He knew this. He went back to the corral. He worked until his hands stopped wanting to be idle. He did not avoid Eli. He didn't know how to avoid Eli anymore, and also he didn't want to. That was the whole problem, condensed to its essence. Chapter 16, The Distance That Opens. Cade pulled back. He didn't mean to do it dramatically. He was, in fact, trying not to do it dramatically. He tried to make it gradual, casual, the natural ebb of daily contact rather than a withdrawal. He was still in the corral every morning. He still answered when spoken to. He was still competent and present and doing his work. But the evening stopped. The sitting by the creek with the math book and the Hopkins poem, the specific quality of late-day conversation they'd built, it stopped. He was tired, he said, or Rex needed him, or he had things to attend to. All of these were sometimes true. None of them were the actual reason. Eli noticed immediately. He was not a person who catastrophized, or who immediately assumed the worst interpretation of a shift in someone's behavior. He gave it a few days, observing. He noted the pattern clearly and without drama. Then he sat with it and thought about what it meant, and what it meant was not something he could immediately resolve, because the most honest interpretation required him to acknowledge things about himself that he'd been circling without fully landing on. He went about his work. He was thorough with the horses. He ate with the camp. He was polite and quiet and did not push. But there was something in him now that had the quality of an unanswered question. That lived right below the sternum like a particular kind of waiting. On the 5th evening of Cade's retreat, Jesse Wade came and sat near Eli by the fire. He's not mad at you, Jesse said without preamble. Eli looked at him. He didn't answer. Just so you know, Jesse said, whatever it looks like, it's not that. You're very forthcoming for someone who doesn't owe me anything, Eli said. Jesse smiled. It was an honest smile, actually, the kind his face made when he wasn't performing it. I've known Cade a long time, he said. He doesn't have anyone else to. He made a gesture that was complicated and resigned. He's not mad at you. I didn't think he was, Eli said quietly. Jesse looked at him for a moment. Something moved in his expression, the specific kind of reassessment a person makes when they realize they have underestimated something. All right, Jesse said. He went back to the fire. Eli sat for a while longer and then went to the corral and spent an hour with nobody's business in the dark. And the mare leaned her forehead against his chest with the uncomplicated love of an animal who has decided you are good. And Eli stood in the dark with his hand along her neck and breathed. Chapter 17, The Honest Thing. On the 6th day, Eli went to find Cade. He found him at the northern end of the corral in the late afternoon, sitting on the fence rail with his back to the camp, and his face toward the canyon wall and the sky going orange and purple above it. He was not doing anything, just sitting, looking at the sky with the particular emptiness of someone thinking about several things at once. Eli climbed the fence and sat next to him, not close enough to crowd, not far enough to signal retreat, just there. Cade looked at him. His expression was guarded in a way it hadn't been for weeks. The door returned to its earlier position, closed and careful. But his eyes couldn't quite sustain the guard. They never fully could. "You don't have to explain anything," Eli said. Cade looked back at the sky. "I know. And I'm not going to pretend I don't notice," Eli said. A long pause. The sun moved. The colors deepened on the canyon wall. "Jesse talked to you," Cade said. "He said you weren't mad at me, that's all." Cade's jaw worked. He shouldn't. "He cares about you," Eli said. "That's what that was." Another pause. Cade's hands were on the rail on either side of him, flat, pressing down slightly. "I know what I'm doing," Cade said quietly. "The pulling back, I know why I'm doing it. It's the right thing to do." Eli was quiet for a moment. "What are you doing it for?" he asked. He asked it gently, without pressure. Just the question, available if Cade wanted to answer it. Cade looked at him. And for a moment the door in his face stood entirely open, all of it, everything he'd been processing for 5 weeks, everything Jesse had said, and everything he'd told himself, and the storm shelter and the Hopkins poem and every evening by the creek. All of it was right there, visible, unhidden. "You know why?" Cade said, very quietly. "I think I do," Eli said, just as quietly. "I think I've known for a while." The sky was going deep blue now at the top, staying orange near the ridge. A nighthawk called somewhere above them. The horses moved softly in the corral behind them. "It doesn't change anything," Cade said. "The situation is what it is." "I know," Eli said. "You're going home, Eli." "I know that too." Cade looked at him. The expression on his face was something that Eli felt in his chest, not like a blow, but like pressure, like something that matters pressing in from all sides at once. "Then why are you here?" Cade said. "Why are you sitting next to me right now?" Eli looked at the sky for a moment. Then he looked at Cade. "Because I want to," he said. "Because whatever the situation is, I want to be where you are. I've wanted that for a while, and I thought you should know that." The silence after this had a quality unlike the silences that had come before. It was full rather than empty, heavy in the way of things that carry real weight. Cade looked at him for a very long time, and his eyes went through several things: disbelief, and something like relief, and something complicated and afraid, and something that was trying to be joy and not quite trusting itself. "Eli," he started. "You don't have to do anything with it," Eli said. "I just didn't want to not say it. That seemed dishonest." Cade let out a breath. It came out ragged slightly, like he'd been holding it for longer than just this conversation. "You," he said, and then stopped, started again. "I don't know what to do with you. I genuinely don't." "You don't have to do anything," Eli said. "I meant that." The dark was coming fast now, the stars appearing one by one in the deep blue. Around them the camp was moving into evening, fire sounds, men's voices, the settling of horses. "I'm afraid of this," Cade said, so quietly it barely made it out. "I know," Eli said, "so am I." Neither of them moved. The sky finished its transformation. The stars were out fully now, and the canyon walls were dark, and the fire was the brightest thing in the world, warm and small and real. Then slowly Cade lifted his hand from the fence rail, and he set it down again, perhaps an inch from Eli's hand, just there, not touching, but there. Eli looked down at the inch between their hands. He felt his heartbeat, very clearly, doing something irregular and warm. He didn't move. He just let them both sit there with the inch between them, and it was something. It was not nothing. It was, in fact, everything that was appropriate to the moment and the situation, and it was also more than either of them had expected, and they both knew it. "The math book," Eli said eventually, very quietly, "if you still want to." A beat, then, "Yeah," Cade said, "tomorrow." "Tomorrow," Eli agreed. Part 5, Storm and Clearing. Chapter 18, What Rex Knows. Rex Harlow was not an unobservant man. He had built his operation on the ability to read people accurately and quickly, to know who was telling the truth and who wasn't, who was going to be useful and who was going to be trouble, who had real capability and who was performing it. He had been wrong about people occasionally over the years. He had gotten better at being wrong less often. He watched Eli Calloway and his son together, from the distances at which he did most of his watching. He noted the working patterns, the conversations, the evenings by the creek with what appeared to be a textbook. He noted the quality of attention between them, the kind of attentiveness that was specific, directional, not the general awareness that people maintain for their environment, but the particular heightening of awareness that one person has for another particular person. He sat with this information for a while. The way he sat with all information he was deciding what to do about. The Calloway boy was, objectively, an asset he hadn't expected. He worked hard, caused no trouble, had gained the confidence of the horses, and by extension, improved the operation of the corral in ways that Rex hadn't needed to arrange, and that had happened of their own organic accord. Several of Rex's men had commented, in the oblique way men in such situations comment on things, that the hostage was all right, which in the vocabulary of outlaws was approximately equivalent to a glowing recommendation. And he was something Cade actually talked to. Rex was aware, without dwelling on it, that Cade didn't talk to people much, had never talked to people much. This was something Rex felt about with the hands of someone reaching in the dark. He was aware it was there. He was aware it was significant. He was not sure of its exact shape or what his responsibility for it was. His relationship with his son was the most genuinely complicated thing in Rex Harlow's life, and he was a man with significant other complications. What he needed to decide was what to do about the situation. The Calloway farm arrangement was stable. June Calloway had been, by all reports, completely cooperative. The boy Sam had done nothing. The whole reason for the leverage had been secured for 6 weeks and showed no sign of requiring reassertion. Rex was a practical man. He hadn't kept Eli Calloway because he still needed to. He'd kept him because it was simpler, because disrupting arrangements mid-course invited complications, because... He stopped this line of reasoning and looked at it honestly. He was a man who respected honesty, even with himself, perhaps especially with himself, because illusions about one's own motives were expensive. He was keeping Eli Calloway because getting rid of the arrangement would require a decision, and that decision had consequences he was not entirely sure he was ready to execute. Not for the Calloway farm, for his son. He went to Eli's tent one evening, a few days after the fence rail conversation that he had not been close enough to hear, but had been close enough to read the shape of. Chapter 19, Rex and Eli the second time. Rex sat on his camp stool outside Eli's tent. Eli sat on his bedroll in the entrance, the lantern between them. They did not speak immediately. They had learned each other's rhythms across 6 weeks, both of them men who didn't speak until they had something to say. "The arrangement with your family is working," Rex said. "I assumed," Eli said. "There's no operational reason to continue holding you." Eli was very still. He looked at Rex. "Your mother has cooperated completely," Rex continued. "Your brother has done nothing. I have no current cause to believe that will change." He paused. "My original purpose for this situation has been served." "You're letting me go," Eli said, not a question, flat. "In a matter of days," Rex said. "I have some things to arrange, routes to coordinate. I won't send you home into any situation that could complicate matters." He looked at Eli steadily. "But yes, you'll go home." Eli said nothing for a moment, a long, complex moment. "I see," he said. Rex studied him. His expression was unreadable as always, but his eyes moved over Eli with that practiced attention. "Is there anything you want to say," he said slowly, "about the situation as it stands?" Eli understood the question. It was not about the logistics of his release. No, he said. He said it carefully, clearly, not dismissively, not painfully, just no. Rex nodded once. He didn't look satisfied or unsatisfied. He looked like a man who has heard what he expected to hear and is deciding what to do with the expectation being met. My son, Rex said and stopped. Eli waited. He's going to have to make a decision, Rex said, about what his life is. I've known that for a while. He paused, and in the pause was a rare, unguarded moment, something that looked briefly like a man trying to be honest about something that cost him. I've been avoiding making it easier for him to make it, because another pause, I don't have anyone else. Eli looked at him. He had not expected Rex Harlow to say anything like this. He knows that, Eli said quietly. That makes it worse, Rex said, not better. A silence, the fire in the distance, the horses. When he goes, Rex said, and he will go, eventually he should go to something, not just away from. He looked at Eli. The look was complicated and direct and entirely without sentimentality. You understand me? Yes, Eli said, I understand you. Rex stood, folded his stool. 2 or 3 days, he said. I'll tell you the morning it's arranged. He walked away. Eli sat in the lantern light alone and pressed his hands flat on his knees and breathed and thought, and felt the strange, complicated weight of things aligning in ways you didn't plan for and don't know what to do with once they do. Chapter 20, the last evening before. Eli didn't tell Cade immediately. He sat with it for a day, which felt dishonest and also felt necessary. He needed to know what he was going to say before he said it, and knowing what to say required knowing what was true, and knowing what was true required sitting with it until it settled. On the evening before the morning Rex had specified, he went to find Cade. Cade was at the creek. He had the math book. He had the Hopkins book. He had his coffee and the lantern and the flat rock, and he was sitting in the attitude of a person who has been waiting for something without admitting they were waiting. Eli sat down beside him, closer than usual. The gap between them had been narrowing in the week since the fence rail, incrementally, the way the temperature changes in late summer. You can't point to the moment it changed. You just notice one day that it has. Rex told me something, Eli said. Cade looked at him immediately. His eyes were alert and careful. He's releasing me, Eli said. Tomorrow he has a route arranged. I'll be home by tomorrow night. The silence was total for a moment. Even the creek seemed to quiet. Cade looked at him and then looked at the creek. His hands had gone very still on the math book. Okay, he said. And then, good, said the way you say something when you need to say the right thing, and the right thing is also the hard thing, and you're going to say it anyway. Cade. No, it's good, Cade said. He kept his eyes on the creek. His voice was level with the effort of it. You should go home. Your family needs you. That was always true. It was, Eli said. He didn't try to smooth this over. He let it be what it was. The night hawks were calling. The fire was warm behind them. The stars were doing what stars do in Wyoming, which is being extremely present in a way that is either comforting or devastating depending on your particular moment. I need to tell you something, Eli said. You don't have to. I want to, Eli said. It's not for you specifically, it's for me. I need to say it honestly or I'll carry it wrong. Cade went quiet. He turned slightly, and Eli could see his profile in the lantern light, jaw tight, eyes careful, the whole careful architecture of a person holding themselves very still. I've never, Eli started and then had to find the right words, which was unusual for him. He generally had the right words. I've never had anyone become real to me this fast, he said. Usually it takes me a long time to trust anyone with anything that matters. I'm careful by nature. I look at things from a distance before I move toward them. He paused. That didn't happen with you. I don't entirely know why, but I want you to know that what happened here was real. The conversations. The horses, the math by the creek, He stopped again. All of it was real to me. Cade had turned to look at him, fully, and his expression was the most open Eli had ever seen it. The carefully maintained door was completely down, and what was underneath it was a face that was raw and young, and very much feeling everything it was feeling without the ability to hide it. "Eli," he said. His voice had gone very low and rough-edged. "You don't have to say anything back," Eli said. I'm not saying it as a question." "I know," Cade said. "I know you're not." He was looking at Eli with those dark, open eyes, and the lantern was warm between them, and the night was very still. Then slowly Cade reached out, and he put his hand over Eli's hand where it rested on the rock between them. His palm warm, his fingers not quite curling closed but present, real, unambiguous. Eli looked down at their hands. He turned his palm up, and Cade's fingers closed properly around it, and they sat there by the creek in the Wyoming dark with their hands held, and neither of them said anything. The creek ran. The stars were out. The fire behind them was small and warm, and the world around the fire was enormous and cold. And in the small, warm space of the lantern light, two young men sat by a creek and held onto each other's hands and let the evening be what it was. "I don't know how to do this," Cade said quietly to the creek. "Neither do I," Eli said. "Not really." "I've wanted to," Cade said, even more quietly. "Tell you for a long time." He paused. "It's the most terrifying thing and I've been in actual terrifying situations. This is worse." The corner of Eli's mouth moved. "That's a significant claim." "I'm serious," Cade said, but his voice had something in it, not quite a smile, but the space where one could be. "You scare me considerably." "In a good way, I hope," Eli said. Cade squeezed his hand. It was a quiet gesture, small and entirely serious. "In the only good way," he said. They sat like that for a long time. Long past when they needed to. Long past when the sensible thing would have been to go to their respective tents and sleep before a day that was going to require clear heads. At some point, the lantern began to run low, and the light around them softened and went amber, and the fire behind them was mostly coals now, and the camp was quiet with sleep. "Cade," Eli said. "I know," Cade said. He knew it was getting late, tomorrow was coming. But he didn't let go of his hand. They sat there a while longer in the last of the lantern light, in the still Wyoming night, while the stars moved imperceptibly overhead, and the creek ran, and the world beyond the canyon was large and full of futures neither of them had mapped yet. Chapter 21. The Morning of Going. Morning came as it does, without asking if you were ready. Eli was up before the sun, which was his habit, but this morning the habit had a different quality to it, the awareness of a last time, which makes ordinary things strange and important. He washed his face in the creek and dried his hands and stood for a moment looking at the canyon walls in the pre-dawn gray, memorizing the way they looked. He didn't do it consciously. He did it the way you do things you later discover you've done. He went to the corral. Cade was already there. Of course he was. He was with nobody's business, as he often was in the mornings, standing at her head, not really doing anything medical or remedial, just there with her, leaning slightly into the warmth of her neck while she stood quietly. Her leg had healed completely. He heard Eli come and lifted his head. In the gray light before sunrise, his face had the quality of someone who had not slept much, and had decided this was acceptable because some things were worth the tiredness they cost. Eli walked up to the fence. They looked at each other. "She's fully healed," Cade said. "I can see that," Eli said. "She'll be fine." "I know she will," Eli said. "You'll take care of her." Cade's jaw moved. He stepped back from nobody's business and walked to the fence. They stood on opposite sides of it, which was not deliberate, just how it happened, and somehow the rail between them felt less like a barrier than like the creek did, something that ran between them but didn't separate them exactly. "Last night," Cade started. Was real, Eli said. I don't need you to qualify it. I wasn't going to qualify it, Cade said. He put his hands on the fence rail. I was going to say, he stopped, tried again. I was going to say that I've been thinking about what your father's place felt like, what you described about it, the east pasture and the ridge that goes lavender at sunset and the horses. He looked at Eli steadily. I've been thinking about what a place like that would look like to someone who had never had a place that was theirs. Eli went very still. I'm not, Cade said carefully. I'm not asking for anything. I'm not making claims. I understand what today is and what comes after it, but I wanted you to know that I was thinking about it. He paused. Because thinking about it meant something. Because I don't think about places. I don't let myself. But you thought about that one, Eli said. Yeah, Cade said. I thought about that one. A long, still moment. The sky above the canyon rim was beginning to lighten, going from gray to a thin, early blue. Eli reached across the fence. He put his hand on Cade's hand on the rail, not holding it this time, just resting, present, both of them looking at the point of contact rather than each other. The road out, Eli said quietly. What your mother wrote about. Yeah, Cade said. It goes somewhere, Eli said. Cade was quiet for a moment. Then he turned his hand under Eli's and held it briefly once, just once, and let go. They stood there on opposite sides of the fence in the early light, and the world was very quiet. Take care of Moses, Eli said. He'll be a disaster without you, Cade said. Tell him I said hello. He's a horse. He'll understand, Eli said. The corner of Cade's mouth moved, that particular small, warm movement. Yeah, he said softly, maybe he will. Chapter 22, The Road. Rex's man Briggs rode with Eli as far as the Casper Powder River Road, then peeled off without a word. Rex had, in the end, arranged it cleanly the way he arranged everything. No fanfare, no final address. He'd handed Eli a letter at dawn with a single line inside it written in his precise hand, delivered as agreed, T. Calloway, for the farm, for June, proof of arrangement, something that could be useful. Eli put it in his jacket pocket and didn't look at it again. He walked the last 8 miles. He hadn't been asked to. Briggs had offered to take him further, but Eli had shaken his head and got off the horse and thanked him and walked. He needed the time. He needed the 8 miles of Wyoming morning to order himself, the things inside him that needed ordering before he walked back into his life. He thought about his mother, Sam, the farm and the horses and the east pasture and the work waiting for him. He thought about Cade. He let himself do that without interruption. He thought about the lantern light and the held hands and the particular way Cade had looked at him in the storm shelter, and the sound of that quiet laugh by the corral. He thought about a young man who had wrapped his books in oilcloth and was teaching himself mathematics in a canyon camp while building toward a road out he hadn't taken yet. He walked. The road was dusty and warm in the morning sun. The ridge ahead of him was lavender in the early light. He came home. Chapter 23, The Return. He heard Sam before he saw him. Eli. Eli had been in sight of the farm for about 30 seconds, still at the top of the road, when Sam came sprinting from the direction of the barn at a speed that suggested he'd been watching the road from somewhere high up, which was an extremely Sam thing to have done. He braced himself and Sam hit him like a freight train, which at 14 Sam was approximately the size of, and Eli staggered and caught him and held on. And Sam was not crying, but his shoulders were doing the thing shoulders do, when crying is exactly what's happening, but the person has decided they are too old for it. You're here, Sam said into Eli's shoulder. I'm here, Eli said. He held on. I found the message, by the way, Sam said, muffled. The Moses one. I thought you might. I looked it up in the Bible. Sam pulled back slightly. His face was a mess of suppressed emotion and also already sparkling intelligence. Was it actually a chestnut horse? It was, Eli said. Did he escape a lot? Every chance he got, Eli said. Sam's face broke into a grin, sudden, brilliant, the particular grin that had been their father's, that Eli had not seen in weeks and had been missing without fully knowing it. Perfect, Sam said. Perfect name. Their mother came from the farmhouse door. She walked, not ran, because June Calloway did not run toward things. She moved toward them steadily and completely, and she put her arms around Eli when she reached him and held him in a way that said everything she would never say out loud, because she saved her words for things that required them. "You're all right," she said. "I'm all right," he said. She pulled back and looked at him carefully. The way she looked at things, she was checking for damage, thorough and honest, not looking away from anything. Whatever she found, it did not appear to alarm her. She nodded once. "Breakfast," she said, "then you sleep." "There's work." "Sam has been doing the work," she said. "For 7 weeks. The work can wait 2 hours." She went back inside. Sam took Eli's arm and they followed her, and the screen door banged behind them with the exact sound it had always made, which was the best sound in the world. Part 6, The Road Out. Chapter 24, Living Forward. 3 weeks at home. The farm reasserted itself in all the ways farms do, immediate, physical, demanding. There were fences to mend and horses to tend, and the east pasture needed attention, and the irrigation ditch had partially collapsed while he was gone, and the whole thing needed rebuilding. He worked. He slept deeply. He ate his mother's cooking and sat in the evenings on the porch with Sam while Sam read him passages from whatever book he was currently working through, and the ridge went lavender at sunset, and the horses moved in the pasture, and all of it was real and good, and exactly what he'd been holding on to for 7 weeks. He also thought about Cade. Steadily, without urgency, without the particular anxiety that comes from things left unresolved. He thought about him the way you think about something that matters, not constantly, not obsessively, but regularly, with the quality of attention that genuinely important things deserve. He wrote a letter. He wrote it carefully and honestly, the way he did everything. He didn't know if it would reach Cade. He didn't know if the camp was still in the same canyon. Rex Harlow's operations moved. That was their nature. He wrote it anyway, addressed it to the address of a trading post in Casper that he'd seen used in correspondence he'd observed at the camp, figuring that if Rex's outfit had any fixed address in the world, a trading post where supplies were sometimes ordered would be it. He wrote, "Cade, I'm home. The farm is as I left it, which is to say exactly as much work as always. The east pasture needs drainage work, which I've started. The house is solid. Sam as well. He's reading Dickens this week, which is ambitious. I think about the horses often. I think about the conversations by the creek. I think about you often. I want you to know that, not as a demand for anything, just as a true thing. If the road out ever puts you in the direction of Powder River County, it has a specific destination if you want it. The ridge goes lavender at sunset. The east pasture needs help. Moses would probably follow you around too. I mean this plainly and without pressure. Some things are worth saying plainly. Eli Calloway." He sealed it. He wrote it to town and gave it to the postal man and didn't think about it again, because thinking too hard about things you've already done and can't change is a waste of what could be good thinking time. He went home. He went back to the east pasture. He put his hands in the work and he breathed and he lived forward the way his father had always said you had to, not forgetting what was behind you, but facing where you were going. Chapter 25, Things Sam Said. Sam had grown, Eli noticed. Not just physically, though that too, he was broader, his voice had settled further, his hands were harder from work. But in other ways. In the way he moved through the farm with a quiet capability that hadn't quite been there before. In the way he spoke, less chatter, more directness, the specific economy of someone who has had to be responsible for things and has learned the weight of words. He'd kept the farm running. 7 weeks mostly alone, their mother handled the accounts and the decisions, but the physical work had been Sam's, and he'd done it well. Eli walked the whole property systematically in the first days back, checking everything, and what he found was not perfect. A boy of 14 alone for 7 weeks would not produce perfection, but it was solid. It was cared for. The animals were well. "You did good," Eli told him on the third evening home. Sam was sitting on the porch railing, which was his preferred spot for reading. He looked up. "I made some mistakes," he said. "Tell me." Sam told him methodically the 3 things he'd done wrong or imperfectly. Eli listened. Then he told him what he would have done instead, simply, without making it a correction, just, "Here's how I think about it." Sam listened with the same quality of full attention that had always been characteristic of him. "What was it like?" Sam asked when they were done with the assessment. He wasn't asking about the mistakes. He was asking about the camp. Eli was quiet for a moment. "It was not what I expected," he said. He thought about how much to say. He thought about Sam, who was 14 and who he trusted completely and who had earned that trust in his absence. "There was a lot of work," he said. "The horses were interesting. The men were complicated." He paused. "There was a young man there, Rex Harlow's son." Sam looked at him carefully. "Harlow's son," he said. "He's not like his father," Eli said. He tried to find the right way to say it. "He's trying to figure out who he is outside of the context he grew up in, which is a hard thing. It's harder when your context is," he gestured vaguely. "Criminal," Sam said plainly. He was 14, but he was not naive. "Yeah," Eli said, "when your context is that." Sam was quiet for a moment, watching his brother. "Do you think about him?" he said. Eli looked at the ridge. It was going lavender right now, reliably, the way it did every evening. "Yeah," he said, "I do." Sam nodded. He seemed to turn this over internally with the same careful intelligence he applied to astronomy books and fox dens. "What's he like?" he asked. "Careful," Eli said. "Smarter than he thinks he is. Better than his circumstances. He reads, which surprised people. I think it shouldn't, but it does." He paused. "He's good with horses. Better than me, honestly." "That's saying something," Sam said. "It is," Eli agreed. Sam went back to his book. After a moment he said, without looking up, "I hope he figures it out, the road." Eli looked at him. "Yeah," he said quietly, "me too." Chapter 26, 6 weeks after. The letter came on a Tuesday, 6 weeks after Eli had sent his. He was in the east pasture when Sam ran it out to him, waving it above his head in a way that was entirely unnecessary but also entirely Sam. Eli straightened from the drainage work and looked at the envelope, no return address, Casper postmark, and felt something happen in his chest that was quiet and significant. He read it there, leaning against the fence post with the Wyoming sun on his back. "Eli, you'll forgive the delay. The location changed. The mail took time. I've been thinking about what you wrote. I've been thinking about most things for 6 weeks. I left the camp 4 weeks ago. I don't know if that's a surprise or not. I'm in Casper at the moment. I found work at a livery stable, which is perhaps not surprising. The horses are worse here than the ones I'm accustomed to. I'm fixing that slowly. I read Pied Beauty again last week, and then I read it again. I've been thinking about what you said in the storm shelter, that you'd know where you were going when you got there. I didn't believe you then. I've been trying to. The east pasture and the drainage work and the ridge at sunset, I think about those things. I think about them more than I should probably say. I'm not going to ask if the offer stands. That seems like the wrong move. But I wanted you to know that I've been thinking about it. The road, where it might go, what might be at the end of it. I'll write again. Cade. P.S. Tell Sam that Dickens is excellent, but he should read David Copperfield specifically before anything else. It's the one Dickens said was his own favorite. It's about a boy who starts with almost nothing and has to build his life from what he can find. I think Sam would like that. Eli read it twice. Then he folded it carefully and put it in his jacket pocket. He went back to the drainage work. He was smiling, privately and without apology, at the ground. Chapter 27, Correspondence. They wrote back and forth for 3 months. It was, in its own way, its own kind of education. Letters between people who have things they want to say but who have to work within the limits of what paper and distance will carry. You learn to be careful. You learn to say the most important things first because you don't know when the next letter will come, or if it will. You learn the particular courage required to say a true thing and then fold it into an envelope and trust it to the road. Eli wrote about the farm, about the drainage project completed now and the east pasture coming back, about the horses and what each one was doing, about Sam, who had taken Cade's recommendation and read David Copperfield in 11 days and had emerged from it slightly dazed and very passionate, wanting to talk about it with someone. He wrote about his mother, who had asked carefully and indirectly about the young men at the camp, in a way that told him she knew more than he'd said, because she was June Calloway and she always knew more than you said. He wrote about the ridge at sunset. He wrote about that several times. He said once plainly, "I watch it and I think about you. I think about whether you're watching something like it wherever you are. I like knowing you're looking at the same sky." Cade wrote about Casper, about the livery stable and the horses, 2 of which he had apparently decided were exceptional, and 1 of which he had decided was a genius who was deliberately hiding it. He wrote about the books he was reading. He'd found a lending library at a church in Casper, which he described with the particular reverence of someone who has discovered that something exists that they had not known to look for. He wrote about the mathematics, which he was continuing on his own, working through calculus now, slowly but steadily. He wrote about what he was thinking, carefully, with precision, but honestly. He wrote about what it felt like to have made the choice, to have left, to be in a city that didn't know him, building something out of what he could find. He wrote, "It's harder than I thought it would be and also somehow lighter. Like I put down something heavy that I'd been carrying for so long I forgot how heavy it was." He wrote, "I think about the storm shelter a lot, the 8 inches." He wrote, "I think about you." And then one letter, near the end of the 3rd month. "I want to ask something, and I need you to know that I'm asking it as a real question, not a rhetorical one. I'm asking because I mean to know the answer. Is the offer still standing?" Chapter 28, The Answer. Eli wrote back within the day. "Cade, yes. Come when you're ready. There's no hurry. The ridge will be lavender at sunset whenever you arrive. The east pasture could use someone who thinks carefully. The horses would be glad of you. Sam would like to argue about Dickens with someone who actually knows Dickens. I'd like to see your face. Come when you're ready. Eli." Chapter 29, The Arrival. It was a Thursday in October when Cade Harlow rode up the Calloway Road. He was on nobody's business. He'd found her in the livery stable in Casper, left by someone who'd taken cash for her and not asked questions, which told him something about the state of things since he'd left. He'd paid a fair price and taken her back, and she'd nuzzled his face in the very undignified way she had when she was expressing strong feeling, and he'd held her jaw and leaned his forehead against hers for a moment, and it had felt, in some inarticulate way, like the first right thing in weeks. He came up the road on a Thursday morning in October, with his saddlebags holding everything he owned, which included the math textbook and the Hopkins poems and David Copperfield, and nothing from the camp, because none of that was his life anymore. He was terrified. He had decided this was acceptable. He saw the farm at the top of the road, the farmhouse, white painted, the barn beyond it, the pastures stretching to the ridge on the east side. The ridge wasn't lavender yet because it was morning, but the light was good on it, warm and early, and he could see how it would go at sunset. He saw Eli at the fence of the front pasture, which he appeared to be mending. He was working with the focused, efficient quality he applied to everything physical, not yet looking up because he hadn't heard the horse on the soft road dirt. Cade stopped nobody's business at the gate. He sat there for a moment. His hands were on the reins, and his heart was doing something that he decided to classify as reasonable given the circumstances. Then Eli looked up. He didn't move for a second. He just looked. And then he set down the fence pliers he'd been holding, and his expression, direct, still, open, did something that Cade had no word for except true. He walked toward the gate. Cade got down from nobody's business. He stood on the road side of the gate with the latch between them, which seemed right, somehow. He would not just walk in. He would wait for the gate to open. Eli unlatched it. He pulled it open. He stood in the gap and looked at Cade from 3 feet away in the October morning, and his eyes were warm and direct and not performing anything. "You're here," Eli said. "I'm here," Cade said. A pause 3 feet, October air. "Nobody's business," Eli said, looking at the mare. "She found you." "I found her," Cade said, "or we found each other." "Same thing," Eli said. Then he stepped forward. 2 steps which closed the 3 feet, and he put his hand on Cade's shoulder, and Cade exhaled fully, completely, the kind of exhale that comes at the end of something long, and they stood there in the gateway of the Callaway farm on a Thursday morning in October. 2 young men who had found each other in improbable circumstances and had decided, deliberately and with full awareness of the difficulty, that the finding was worth following. "Come in," Eli said. He stepped back. He left his hand on Cade's shoulder and stepped back, guiding rather than pulling. "I'll show you the east pasture. I want your opinion on the drainage." "Now," Cade said. "Eventually," Eli said, and there was something in his voice that was warm and slightly laughing and entirely Eli. "Come in first." They walked through the gate together. Nobody's business followed them, because nobody's business went where Cade went, and Moses, whose pasture they were entering, lifted his large, dramatic head and looked at the newcomer with one alert eye, and then apparently made a decision, because he walked over at a stately pace and put his nose on Cade's chest. Cade went completely still. Then slowly he raised his hand to Moses's jaw. "Hey," he said softly. "He remembers you," Eli said, "from the stories." Cade looked at him. "You told him stories about me." "I mentioned you," Eli said. "He's a good listener." Cade looked at the horse, who was now leaning into his hand with the full devotional weight that Moses applied to things he had decided about. He looked at the farm, the house, the barn, the pastures, the east ridge. He looked at Eli, standing in his own land in the October light, watching him with those calm, warm, direct eyes. "The ridge," Cade said. He looked east. "It'll go lavender at sunset." "Every evening," Eli said, "without exception." Cade looked at the ridge. He nodded once slowly. "I'd like to see that," he said. "You will," Eli said, simply certain. "You will." And they walked together through the October morning toward the farmhouse, and Moses followed them, and nobody's business followed Moses, and the ridge waited, as ridges do, patient and unhurried, for the evening and its lavender. Chapter 30, Evening. The sun went down behind the western hills at 5:20 on that Thursday in October. They watched it from the east fence, Eli and Cade, side by side on the top rail the way they'd sat in the canyon camp on the night they'd first said true things to each other. Sam was with them, on Cade's other side, because Sam went where things were interesting and had decided, in approximately 45 minutes of conversation, that Cade Harlow was one of the most interesting people he'd met, specifically because Cade answered questions directly without condescension and had strong opinions about Dickens. Their mother was at the house. She had shaken Cade's hand when Eli introduced him and looked at him with the careful, thorough assessment she applied to everything, and then had made coffee without comment, which, from June Callaway, was its own kind of welcome. The light changed on the ridge. It went gold first, then amber, then, as the sun dropped behind the hills to the west, It went that specific, irreplaceable lavender. Like the color the world invents specially for the last light that can't be named any other way. Cade looked at it. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. His face was in the light, and his face was doing what faces do when they see something genuinely beautiful for what might be the first time. A kind of quiet surrender, a putting down of defenses that beautiful things require. Eli watched him look at it. He watched Cade's face in the lavender light. Sam, between them, was looking at the ridge with a small, satisfied expression, the expression of someone who knew the ridge would be lavender and had waited to see someone else discover it for the first time. "There it is," Sam said. "There it is," Cade said softly. Eli said nothing. He looked at the ridge, and then he looked at Cade's face in the last light, and he thought about all the roads that lead to particular places, and all the particular places that are worth the roads. He thought about barefoot on cold ground and 3 words, and a lane between tent lines and a creek in a canyon and a letter, and a gate unlatched on a Thursday morning. He thought here. He thought this. He thought yes. The ridge stayed lavender for exactly as long as the light allowed, and then it deepened to purple and then to dark, and the stars came out over Wyoming, and the 3 of them sat on the fence in the good cold dark of the October evening, and the farm was quiet around them, and the horses moved gently in the pasture. After a while, Eli put his hand on the fence rail. After a while, Cade's hand found it. They sat there as the night finished arriving, with their hands together in the dark and the stars bright overhead, and the Callaway farm warm with lamplight behind them, and it was not the end of anything. It was the beginning of everything that came after. Epilogue. The world they built. Spring came to the Callaway farm with all the bluster and generosity it usually managed, rain that meant it, then sun that meant it, and the east pasture green in a way it hadn't been in years, the drainage work paying off in new grass that came up thick and good. Cade had been there through the winter. He'd asked carefully if he could stay through the season. There was work he wanted to finish, he said, the barn roof being the most immediate of it. Eli had said yes. June Callaway had not commented on this, which meant she had accepted it, which was her way with most important things. The roof was done by February. By March, the fence on the north side needed rebuilding, which Cade began without being asked. By April, he and Sam had started on a new system for the irrigation ditch that Sam had designed, largely on his own, in a diagram that he'd spent most of January working out in a notebook. Cade had found several improvements in the design and suggested them, and Sam had argued about 2 of them and accepted 1, and the whole thing had taken on the quality of a project that 2 people found genuinely interesting, which made it go faster than any project done from obligation. Eli watched all of this from the middle of it, from within his own life and work, and he felt something he didn't try to name too precisely, because named things sometimes lost something in the nomming. He felt right, like something had come to its right shape, like the farm was a size it was supposed to be, that it had been slightly too small for before without him knowing it. He and Cade talked every evening, the way they had by the creek, unhurried, real, working through things that were interesting or difficult or both. Cade was through calculus now and working on something self-directed, a project about the mathematics of irrigation that had started as a passing interest and become something more serious. Eli was reading, which he'd always done, but now had someone to argue with about it, which made the reading better. They sat on the porch in the evenings when the weather allowed. They watched the ridge. It went lavender, reliably, every evening it had enough light, and they watched it together with the specific quality of shared attention that people have for things they both love. One evening in late April, Cade said, "I want to tell you something." Eli looked at him. Cade was looking at the ridge, in that way he had when he was finding words carefully. "I spent a long time," Cade said, "being afraid of what I felt, about this, about you, about," he stopped, restarted, "about who I am, about what that meant about my life and what my life could be. I know, Eli said quietly. I'm not afraid of it anymore, Cade said. He said it with the directness and certainty of someone stating a fact they have verified. He finally looked at Eli. I want you to know that. I'm not afraid of it. Eli looked at him. The ridge was going lavender behind him. The light was warm. Neither am I, Eli said. And then, because he was a man who believed in saying true things plainly, I love you. I've known that for a while. I wanted to say it out loud. Cade looked at him. His face did what it had always done in the moments when the door came fully down, something raw and young and absolutely real, something without performance or protection. Yeah, he said softly, his voice was low. I love you too. I've known that since, he shook his head slightly. Since a while. They sat together on the Callaway porch in the April evening, in the last of the lavender light, close enough that their shoulders were touching. The farm was around them and quiet. Moses was visible in the east pasture, dramatic as always, tossing his head at something real or imaginary. Nobody's business stood near him with the air of someone managing a complicated situation. They sat there as the light went, and neither of them moved, and it was easy. It was exactly, entirely, straightforwardly easy, the way things are when they're right. You know, Sam said from the doorway behind them, where he'd been standing for approximately the last 5 minutes with a book in his hand. I'm going to need you both to stop being sentimental for at least long enough for me to ask Cade about the irrigation equations. Sam, Eli said. I'm serious, Sam said. We have a timing issue in the secondary channel and I need a second opinion. Cade turned around. There was something happening at the corners of his mouth that was refusing to be contained. Show me the diagram, he said. Sam held it up immediately. He had been holding it the whole time. You were standing there with that the whole time, Eli said. I was being polite, Sam said. I waited until you finished. He came out onto the porch with the dignity of a person who has been very patient and is now done being patient. Cade, look at section 3. Yeah, Cade said. He was already looking. I see it. You need to. He stood up from the porch chair and went to look at the diagram properly. Eli watched them. His 14-year-old brother and the young man who had been a hostage-taker's son, and was now something else entirely, something he was building every day from what he could find, arguing productively over an irrigation diagram in the April evening. Eli leaned back in his chair. He looked at the ridge, purple now, fully dark at the top, the last color draining from the west. He thought all things counter, original, spare, strange. He thought, yes. He thought this is exactly it. The end. The ridge goes lavender every evening. Some roads lead exactly where they're supposed to go. Some people find each other in the most improbable places. And love, when it comes from courage and honesty, and the willingness to say true things plainly, is worth every road that led to it. Bell final hook plus call to action. But here's what you don't know yet. Sam found something in a letter. In the letter Rex Harlow sent, the one Eli carried home in his jacket pocket, there was something hidden in the margin. Small letters, written carefully, in ink a shade lighter than the rest. Something that Rex had written and then chosen not to address. Something that changes the entire picture of what those 7 weeks were really about. Sam found it 6 months later, by accident in winter, when he was looking for something else entirely. And the question, the one that keeps him up that night, staring at the ceiling with the folded letter in his hand, is whether to tell Eli. Should I tell you what happened next? Drop a comment below. Thumbs up like this story if it moved you. Bell subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Speech balloon, tell me in the comments whose journey hit you harder, Eli's courage or Cade's road out.